So let's get started with our first project in creating TIFF files in Photoshop that we can animate in Premiere. We need to create a canvas that will be the appropriate size for our project, and we discussed that in class, and it will be 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels at 300 dpi RGB. We must always have specific layers and required layers in our Photoshop file. Double click on the word background and let's call that our white layer. And let's go up to the hamburger and create a new layer called black. After we create it, we see that it's blank. We go up to edit, come down to fill, and we fill this layer with black. And then we'll go back up to the hamburger and create a new layer again. We will name this one blank. And as you recall from class, we need these 3 layers in every single project that we create in Photoshop when we're making TIFF files for animation. It is also very helpful to always have available your layers window, your history window, and your channels window. These 3 windows are essential in the steps required to make a TIFF file for animation in Premiere. Let's go back to the hamburger, create a new layer, and name that one dot number 1. This is going to be our first dot that we will animate. We also need rulers because it's going to be helpful to have guidelines as we work on this project. We can go up to View and come down to Rulers if we don't have rulers, and click on it and our rulers will pop up. And our rulers are very helpful because that is where we get our guidelines. In Preferences, regarding units and rulers, I prefer that we use percentage because it allows me to find a center point when I'm centering images that I want to animate. This is what I prefer. So I grab my guidelines from the rulers and I make a center point in my canvas. I go to 50% on both sides so that I know exactly where my center is. Now we're going to create a dot, so we go up to our elliptical marquee. We make sure that the feather is 0 because we want a crisp edge. I hold the Shift key down and I draw a circle on the highlighted layer named dot number 1. I'm going to fill it with a gradation. I'm going to use 2 colors, a color and white, with the gradation tool. As I click on the blue and white, you can see that it switches. I'm going to make sure that my white is the highlight. I'm going to use the center function of the gradation tool with blue and white. And there I have a white highlight on a blue circle. Gives it a little bit of form. Okay, I'm going to deselect this so my boundary goes away and I have a crisp ball. On black, on white, you can see how crisp and sharp it is. There we are on the transparent background. I have a ball with a crisp edge that I'm going to animate. Now I'm going to add some layer effects in Photoshop just to give you some ideas of all the things available to do in Photoshop. I might actually add the drop shadow in Premiere when I animate the project, but I want to start showing you these amazing tools that are available to us in Photoshop. Look at all the variations that can happen when I work with the sliders within this tool. Once again, this is a layer style. It's the drop shadow tool in Photoshop. Now we have a ball that looks like it has some dimension to it and it's casting a shadow. Now I'm going to put my boxes on it so I can see my dead center, and I'm going to center this ball in my canvas so that when I animate in the future, that will be my anchor point. We'll discuss this as we progress through the course. So now my dot is dead center in my canvas where I'm creating my dots in Photoshop to animate with Premiere. I'm going to add a stroke just to put a small white edge on it. As you recall from some of the paper cutout animations, I used small white edges just to make an item that was animated look like it was a paper cutout floating on a piece of paper with a cast shadow. I just want to show you these tools. You can see that the stroke can be on the inside or the outside. It can vary in our width, and just play with it until it appeals to you. We can turn it on, we can turn it off. These effects are in the layer, but I don't have to use them, but they are there, and you'll see why as we begin to create a TIFF file that is necessary when we animate in Premiere. Now, we always want to save our projects a lot, so I'm going to save this original canvas as a PSD file in my appropriate folder so I always know where to find it. You can categorize your projects whichever is best for you, just so you know where files that you create are located and that all the files of a specific project are together. I'm going to call this Making Dots for Animation, and it is a PSD file, Photoshop file, which is the top file on the list. Save. Always save at maximum compatibility. There we go. Making Dots for Animation, PSD, and you can see it with all the layers. These are required layers in our projects. We always will need a white layer, black layer, and a blank layer. Now, we're going to make a new dot. So I'm adding a new layer, calling it dot number 2. There we go. It is on top. It is the highlighted layer. I'm going to make a second dot that we will animate. I want it to be very similar in size, so I'm bringing guidelines over to the edges of my original blue dot, and you will see why in a moment. These guidelines are very helpful as we create projects. Now I'm going to go back to my marquee tool at 0 feather, and I'm going to go from one corner to the next corner, holding my shift key down to make sure that the circle for this dot is the same size as the first dot. The feather is 0, which means my edge should be sharp. I'm going to create a second dot with a different color. Let's make a red dot. Once again, we go through the same process with the gradation tool to make it a red dot with a white highlight. There we go. Using the second step, the second tool of the gradation tool. Watch the video closely and you'll see what I mean. Now I'm going to deselect, and I have 2 dots. 2 dots and all my required layers that I will need in every single project that I create for animation. Now I'm going to create the same effects, the layer styles, on the second dot that I used on the first. So with the blue dot highlighted, I right click, copy layer styles, then I highlight the red dot and paste layer styles with a right click. Both of these effects now match each other, and both dots have the same effects but just different colors, and they will be created as separate files. You can see if I turn one off, that whole layer goes away with the effects. Now I'm going to start creating the TIFF file that we need to animate. So we must center our dot. You can see I do that with the transformation tool that gives me a dead center. I need to have the black layer turned on, and I must combine my dot layer with the blank layer. So I hold my command key down, highlight them both, then I merge them. We will go over this in class every week so that you become familiar with this. As I merge them, the effects merge into this single file, and it will become the TIFF file that I need to create to animate with a crisp alpha channel. So after we merge it, we load the selection. You can see how it outlines the dot and the shadow. Then we have to have our channels window up, which is very important. We click on alpha, which gives us a very crisp alpha channel. We see the red. We name this blue dot number 1, and we're going to save it as a TIFF file with this alpha channel. Blue dot number 1 with the alpha channel. I say save. I go through these functions, everything's okay, but I discard layers and save the copy. Now, this has now been saved as a TIFF file with a very crisp, clear alpha channel, which was created with the black layer, the blank layer, and is essential for every file that we will create for animation in this class. This is an old-fashioned way, but it is the best way to learn how to create a crisp and sharp alpha channel, and it oftentimes gives us a superior image compared to other ways of importing files for animation. This is a process that I want us to learn because the quality of your animation will be improved. We are going to go through the same process with the red dot. We bring the blank layer up, we highlight the blank layer and the dot layer by holding down the command key, clicking on them both. We merge them. We then load the selection. This will show you the dotted line of the dot and the shadow and the effect. We click on our alpha channel, and there we have it. The red indicates old-fashioned terminology called rubylith, which gives us a crisp alpha channel. We save it. In the same folder where we have the other dot, we name it red dot number 2 TIFF. Must be a TIFF file. With the channels, we save it, we discard the layers, we say OK. Now we go back above in our history to the layer order because it brings back all of our layers. If we don't do that after we merge, we lose all of our effects. So after we merge, we must go back in our history to the function before so that we preserve all our layers. You can see how they pop back. We will go over this in class again and again so that we learn this process. Now we have 2 dots with the shadows made into TIFF files that we will then animate in Premiere.